I think that when we become less beholden to these hierarchies, we open up different spaces for experimentation and exploration. You know, so often in the way community arts or projects that are meant to help communities are framed, it's directional. It's like the artists are helping the communities, and I don't think that's true at all. Or even what's the most interesting about this work, these dynamics produce some exciting possibilities for the art itself and for the artists. And I think that's something that I'm also really interested in, is if we get outside of these hierarchical distinctions, if we stop seeing the artist as somebody who can help the community, then maybe we also open up different possibilities for the way artists can support each other and the people who are around them, who help them live in this precarious world. My name is Catherine Wagley, and I'm an art critic and a journalist working in Los Angeles. I had just seen the Los Angeles Poverty Department perform the new Compassionate Downtown at MoCA. That performance asked a lot of questions about what community could be and what community could be in these places that are precarious, like downtown specifically, where you have the Skid Row community and then also this resurgence of an art scene and this gentrification that's happening. This new money class moving back into downtown. It felt like an opening to think about these things that I'd already been thinking about. What is community and what is community in the arts?
No thanks, ma'am. I'd rather stay here.
But why? It's wet and cold out here.
I don't mind the cold, ma'am. I'm used to it.
I always feel like one thing that's really important in art communities, whatever that means, because there are so many of them in a city like Los Angeles, is that we need to support each other. What I was thinking about is what are artist groups or artist collectives who are engaging with communities because they're really interested in those communities and being part of those communities and acting and engaging within those communities, and not really thinking about community engagement as it's important in the art world or in art world hierarchies, or they're not really thinking, okay, let me start this space and then we can do programs at these major art museums. They're actually thinking, how do I be in this community, and how do we as artists engage with the histories of community artists? Like the Crenshaw Dairy Mart, like part of their statement is that they want to engage with Inglewood and Inglewood's history of community arts. And the Los Angeles Poverty Department for a long time has been based here, working with people who live on Skid Row, and they're the artists. Like they're the artists who are performing with the Los Angeles Poverty Department. It's not about bringing in outside artists. And Summaeverythang too, which is Lauren Halsey's project, that was initially envisioned as a community center that was going to be for people that she grew up with and the community she grew up with, and then it had to be rerouted because of the pandemic. Like they weren't able to open in the way they'd initially imagined. So they created a farm box program where they were delivering farm boxes to communities in South Los Angeles. I think part of why I wanted to explore community arts specifically was because it's a category that hasn't been embraced necessarily by the art discourse, or it's been kind of put off to the side with this stigma. And I was really thinking, is there a potential in this term, community arts? It's a very simple term and it's very clear, and so much clearer than relational aesthetics, which isn't the same thing at all, or social practice, which again isn't really the same thing in the way it's been manifest. I was just wondering if maybe there was a point in revisiting this term and giving it a different kind of prominence, given that our conversations are maybe shifting a little bit around community and art.
My name is Ali Reza. I'm one of the co-founders of the Crenshaw Dairy Mart. We're here on the Crenshaw Dairy Mart playground.
My name is Noel Olivas. I'm one of the co-founders here at the Crenshaw Dairy Mart. Patrice Colors, Ali Reza, and myself, we all met in art school.
I think a lot of the conversations we were having in those 2 years, we were still in art school in 2018, and we didn't open our doors until 2020. But while we were still in art school, just the team cleaning the space, saging the space, things like that. A lot of the conversations we were having was thinking through how a dairy mart operated and supported a community, and how a prospective art space could do the same.
I think the first time we actually stepped here You know, we saw how iconic that sign is. It's such a representation of its time, but also it's a landmark. It's so noticeable. We were like, you know, this is the Crenshaw Dairy Mart. That's the name that we're gonna take. We just really wanted to keep that name because we knew that it was part of the neighborhood. You know, we didn't want to like take that away to put a new name on there. We wanted it to be the Crenshaw Dairy Mart, even including letting the sign below where it says like milk and groceries and things like that, because that's the way we kind of see the things that we're doing here. A different way of nourishing, but more nourishing the spirit, where we talk about abolition, ancestry, and healing. Those are the three main aspects of what we lead and what we believe here at the Mart.
One of the things that we launched at the height of the pandemic, we saw the proliferation of mutual aid projects, specifically community fridges, popping around the city. And it was one of the things that we wanted to be a part of. And community organizers, Juice Wood and Vern Yancey, reached out to us and they were just like, we want to do something here. A lot of folks in Inglewood hadn't supported them with the idea of establishing a community fridge, and it was something we definitely wanted to do and be a part of with them. You really got to see mutual aid as one of the tenets of abolitionist praxis. I think it really informed the abolitionist pod in that sense, you know, having a community fridge that's 20 feet in diameter that has not only healing green space in the middle of a city, but also just having fresh fruits and vegetables and having an abundance of that. The abolitionist pod is birthed out of a years-long initiative that we're starting, Pray for LA, which is really a critique on the healthcare system and how it's failed us and like steeped in capitalism during the pandemic, and how different this pandemic would have been if we had lived in an abolitionist mainframe.
I think about this space, I think we all think about this space as a sacred space. And what I mean by sacred is bringing in folks, inviting and collaborating with other projects and making those connections and relationships and networking and inviting our friends and being open to the community as well. I believe that the Crenshaw Dairy Mart is reminding us about our divinity, you know, of our own spirits and how we can lift our spirits, because we do live in a system that is designed to break it. Here at the Mart, we really do our best to lean with love and care.
Patrice talks about there being like two behemoth phases of abolition. You know, one of them being dismantling harmful systems, and the other phase of abolition is really prototyping and imagining and piloting different spaces and imagining different ways that the world can be. It's a deep kind of investigative way to also tap other spaces and have them co-imagine with us, give them the opportunity to see what we're piloting and what we're imagining, and have the compassion and have the love to co-imagine together, to pilot something together and create our own terms around it, and being very intentional about those terms that we create. I feel like that's really important. Being non-negotiable in some senses, but moving forward with love as well.
I'm John Malpe. This is the Skid Row History Museum and Archive up there.
I'm Harriet Brouwers, and I am the Associate Director of the Los Angeles Poverty Department, LAPD, or as they say, the good LAPD, in Skid Row. And this used to be Skid Row. We're here on Broadway, and Skid Row now is starting on Main Street. So we're right at the corner now of Skid Row.
The LAPD started in 1985. In 1980, you didn't see scads of people sleeping on the street in New York, where I was living at that time, or in LA. A lot of things happened in 1980. Ronald Reagan was elected, for example. And in about 1983, in New York, suddenly you did see scads of people living on the street, and here as well. I happened to be here right when I was doing my writing, right before the Olympics, and there was a concerted effort to put a smiley face on the city, and there were people were being harassed and arrested and stuff like that. I went to government hearings and I met a bunch of residents and activists from Skid Row who were testifying to the County Board of Supervisors. I started volunteering for them. I wrote my piece. I went to New York. I came back. I kept spending time here because I thought it was very compelling. Within a year, I was here for the next, up until now, you know. My work was in New York was like funny and serious, but here, you know, is so much more connected to people and all kinds of levels of activities.
I was working as an artist in the Netherlands and in America, so I was going back and forth. And a friend of mine from Baltimore, where I was making a performance, met John Malpied while I was in Amsterdam, and she hooked us up. And that's how I met John.
Ladies and gentlemen, to the LA Party Department. We will be performing this afternoon at 1 p.m. at 112 Winston Street in downtown Los Angeles.
When you let people move, when you let people improvise, when you write your own text, people get agency, they express themselves, and they also get to connect. And that's what happened in LAPD. Also, it's also at the same time a network where people started connecting, or you know, they did for many years, and helped each other with getting housing or referrals to a drug counselor or whatever it was needed.
If you get a bunch of people together, it's a group activity, theater or something like that, or performance. At the beginning of LAPD, after the first show, it was all improvised, developed through improvisation and not really written down, just a scenario would be written down. And so that captured the dynamism because people weren't always on the same page, and that was totally okay.
I ain't never had no Social Security card because I ain't never applied for that.
What really happened is I got into drug abuse and I got placed in a board care home in Claremont.
The managers, if they don't like you the way you look or like your attitude, they just kick you out.
When I started LAPD, I saw that like a lot of places, people would get kicked out for not acting right. So that meant the people that were the most in need, in a certain sense, were the ones who were out in the cold because they didn't act right. So LAPD was really expanded the notion of acting right. This is very desirable real estate. If nobody lives here, what's the problem? If the only people who live here are drug addicts, what's the problem? But in fact, it's a hugely sophisticated recovery community here. There's low-cost housing, free recovery programs. People stay in the community. When we did that project, there were 53 weekly recovery meetings run by, people in recovery living in the neighborhood.
It's establishing that it is a community and changing the narrative that is there, because people know about Skid Row. And what people know about Skid Row is don't go there because it's all drug addicts and criminals. This is also a space that is not only an exhibition about how to build affordable housing and how things need to change in LA, because at the moment it's impossible to build enough, but it's also a space where people can meet and have their own meetings, or where we talk about this exhibition and have follow-up conversations. We always bring different groups of people together, and then the performances, of course, do that.
Where we see massive shifts to urban concentration. They want to build housing in Skid Row, but they don't want to have the people live in Skid Row.
Jose Huizar was bringing back Broadway, and so we wanted to do our civic duty and bring back Broadway by bringing Skid Row history back to Broadway where it had always been. And we were able to raise the bucks at least to do that for a while, and then it turned out we were able to continue it. One thing we know is there's a dearth of artistic or communal spaces in Skid Row, and so we started a festival for that reason. We wrote a paper for that reason with Americans for the Arts called Making a Case for Skid Row Culture, and we started this space for those reasons. We just keep doing our work in response to what we feel is needed to preserve the neighborhood and the interests of the neighborhood. And then other people are doing their work, which is creating words and programs and stuff like that. It all seems to work out one way or the other.
Do you want a room on that floor, or do you want to stay out in the cold and shiver?
What they need to do is give them a stake in the place where they live. Give them a responsibility.
Some look through you like you're not even real.
Hey man, what this damn nail clipper doing here?
Oh my
You ain't supposed to have that stuff up in here.
Become part of the community. Learn from community practices and work to realize them.